Yeah, on Norris, I think he was a little bit shocked himself as well. Devastated is maybe a big word, but he didn't know why they booed him.
I've seen team orders before. This just seemed like they're trying to sing Kumbaya or something around a fire at McLaren.
I think what you see at Red Bull now is that there is more of a positive feeling. As long as Christian was there, you felt like you were in a negative spiral and you couldn't get out of it.
Record-breaking Italian Grand Prix. Super quick pole position lap, super quick race. Over before you know it. We're going to talk through it and probably go around the same race length here on Paddock Update. I'm Jim Kimberley and I've got Tim Kraaij from GPBlog to go through a Italian Grand Prix that was somehow exciting despite it being processional. Max Verstappen surprising everybody by taking pole position and then winning the race, stopping the flow of McLaren dominating the season. And interestingly, Tim, this was the first win for Max Verstappen since his last visit to Italy for the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. What a weekend for him. He's simply lovely, you'd say.
Yeah, it's been a while, and it's been a while for Red Bull as a whole. The team has been in quite a downfall already since midway 2024. Of course, really struggling to find the real pace to win a race on merit. Of course, they won in Brazil at the end of last year, but yeah, that was more due to Max Verstappen's masterclass in the rain than it was due to the car that they had. And I think this was again, I think maybe one of the first again where the car was more in line with what the circuit needs, and it was a big change compared to last season. Of course, last season in Monza they had a horrible weekend with a P7 in qualifying and P6 in the race for Max Verstappen. But this season, yeah, it was all turned around, and yeah, they changed the approach a little bit. Helmut Marko told us during the weekend in terms of how they approached the weekend, and especially Max had a big voice in the setup they eventually choose. There were some doubts, especially from technical director Pierre Wacher, which he admitted as well to Ludo, who's in the paddock at the moment. Pierre Wacher wanted to have a bigger wing, a bigger rear wing, because he thought the qualifying would go better. It would have, not been beneficial for the race, but he thought that the qualification would have not gone as well as they thought it would be with that wing. But they went for the small wing. Max was really dedicated. He really said that this is the wing I can do it with. There were a lot of doubts, but he proved them wrong. In the qualification, he took pole. It was not really messy, that's not the right word, but the first lap was some fighting. He had to give the first place back to Lando Norris, who drove on the grass, and he cut the chicane, of course, in the first chicane, so he had to give that place back. He did. After that, you maybe thought, okay, now Lando's going to run away with it, but no, the McLaren was not near the pace of the Red Bull today. Max took over with the top speed that he had with the smaller wing, which was really beneficial during the race, and he ran away with it. He overtook Lando, got away from his DRS right away, and they never saw him again. So a big sign of intent from Max Verstappen from Red Bull Racing. Although, mostly on the Max Verstappen side, because you need to scroll a long way down if you want to find Yuki Tsunoda in the list of results.
Yeah, just looking down, 80 seconds behind Max Verstappen in P13. So, yeah, you're saying about Red Bull found their pace. I'd say one of the Red Bulls found their pace, and another frustrating weekend for Yuki. But let's focus at the front, because you rightly say Lando Norris and Max Verstappen going hammer and tongs in those first few laps. Piastri was a little bit further behind and having to deal with the pesky Charles Leclerc, who dared to try and get past and get into the fight to make it 3 teams at the front. That settled down a little bit, but going to the end of the race, that's where the main controversy happened, that we saw McLaren have, well, how I deem it, and I'm very interested to hear how you'd say this should go, something that happens during a racing season, misfortune, you have a bad pit stop. This time it happened to Lando Norris, and this wasn't team orders to say this should happen, that should happen, like we saw in Hungary. This was just misfortune for Lando Norris with the front left not going on, but the team then asking Oscar Piastri to let Lando through and then fight. I've seen team orders before when it's trying to be strategically good. This just seemed like they're trying to, I don't know, sing Kumbaya or something around the fire at McLaren. What was your thoughts on this? It just seemed utterly bizarre.
Yeah, I've said to you before we started recording this, I still haven't made up my mind fully on it, to be honest. It's a very strange thing to see in F1. The thing is, like, it is in line with everything McLaren has been doing for over multiple years now. They're really adamant that they want two drivers with equal chances, that if there's any unfairness, which was even seen over a race win in Hungary last season, they want to equal that out. If there's some unfair treatment to one of the other driver, they want to equal that out in the race by a team order. It still feels strange. It's a cringe situation during those type of moments. You already feel the board radio coming. You see the moment that he needs to let Lando pass. It doesn't feel right, and I think a lot of that was reflected in the way the audience in Italy responded as well. There was a lot of booing to McLaren overall. I think it was mainly focused on Lando and less so on Piastri, I would say. But yeah, it still feels strange. I think it's too much in how far they take this, because you feel like you come at a point where, like, Lando had a DNF last race in Zandvoort because of an engine failure. That was not his doing. That was not by his doing. So do they now have to give Oscar Piastri a DNF as well with an engine blowout to equal that out as well? It's how far do you take this? And I think the interesting part was I watched the press conference after the race with the three, and they got a lot of questions about the team order, of course, and they insist that they would do the same if it comes down at Abu Dhabi. And I think that's interesting to think about. If we have a situation in Abu Dhabi where this situation happens and changing between 2 and 3 makes a difference between who is going to be the champion or not, I think, yeah, if you change it around, then you're going to have a lot of talk about this championship, and not in a good way, I would say. So I think the precedent that they've set themselves is, yeah, putting them in a really difficult position if it really comes down to it. Because if you now say, okay, we're going to do this every race, and we come in a similar situation in Abu Dhabi where the rules are reversed, and you don't do it because it's the final race of the season, you fucked Oscar over. So yeah, that's the precedent that they're setting themselves. So yeah, we can come to a situation, and we don't know if we come in this situation, but we can come in a situation where the final race of the season, or the final deciding moment of the season, will be a moment like this. And I think that's not something you want to have a season remembered by. And I have my issues with it.
Being charitable for 1 second and maybe playing devil's advocate to put a different spin on this, Oscar Piastri, I don't know if happy was the right word to comply with this team order to give the place back that he, I won't say rightfully earned, but he didn't do anything wrong, neither did Lando. But do you think Oscar is thinking of the long-term game here, that if he doesn't give the position back, then there's not going to be any team orders that will happen for the rest of the season? He could just have a DNF that ends up screwing everything up and flipping the championship upside down again. And in that situation, if he hadn't done it today, maybe Lando doesn't do it in Mexico or in Qatar, and then the championship changes. Is this long-term thinking?
Yeah, I don't really believe so. I think the first thing is he didn't agree to it, because that was what you heard on the onboard radio. You heard the frustration in terms of, okay, he thought they discussed that mistakes like these are part of racing. That was clear in his onboard radio. And he gave the place back, but in the press conference afterwards, he was asked about that specific quote, and he said, yeah, I think it speaks for itself. While before that, he was like, oh, yeah, I think it's a fair call and stuff like that. But I think there's something in there in terms of the communication before the start of this weekend, or maybe already made a precedent earlier in the season. But I think this was gray area where it was not clear on if they would do a team order in a situation like this. And I think Oscar thought like, okay, this is part of racing, and McLaren thought otherwise. I think there's going to be a discussion afterwards on this. But yeah, you can't turn it back now, because if you turn it back now, Oscar is going to be in a disadvantage for the rest of the season, because if the situation comes around the other way around, he wants to have the same treatment in that situation. So I think that's one part. So he didn't agree, and they will have a talk on it. The second part on it is, I think it's part of the driver as well. And I think McLaren is very happy with the drivers that they have right now. They move very easily to the Constructors' Championship. They're going to have the Drivers' Championship at the end of the season. They still have no conflict within the team, so it moves all very smoothly. And I think for a team, that's very interesting in one way. But I think in terms of the drivers, I've said this before, you would like to have a little bit more juice. You would like to have a little bit more spiciness to a championship. And if you look at a situation like this, you almost go like, it feels like those guys are driving for P5, P6 in the championship, that they don't even care. There's a championship at stake. You don't know how many chances you're going to get. This could be possibly their only shot at a world championship this season ever in their whole career. And to give points away to each other like this, it feels like a friendly match. It doesn't feel like a real championship fight. And I think that's the whole problem of this whole season so far, that we don't really have a championship fight. While those drivers are close to each other, they're not fighting each other. It's like, oh, you're in front. Oh, you're good this race. Oh, I'll leave you to the win. Good luck. Congrats, buddy. And it's all only happy vibes in the team, and it doesn't come to that fightiness. And McLaren will be happy with it, but I think one of the two drivers at the end of the season is really gonna regret the choices made during the season. And if McLaren doesn't have a good car in the next 1, 2, 3 seasons, they're really gonna regret it, because then maybe the realization is gonna kick in that was his only shot, whoever it is, at a world championship title, or at least could have been.
Absolutely. I don't think I'd believe it back in early 2000s if we said that Kimi Räikkönen will only have one chance at really getting the championship when he gets it, and then never again. And then coming in 2007, well, you wouldn't think that would be it with his previous seasons, but it's so tepid. It's so tepid. I really want to move on from it, but quickly, just a quick word, especially from a Dutch person like yourself, on Max Verstappen's classic team radio reaction to it, laughing. It was like he was another commentator putting his point of view on it. What did you think of Max? Almost in hysterics in the cockpit.
I think it gave the overall feel of the audience as well, like just in disbelief on why they changed. And I'm always surprised on how much Max catch on to in terms of what happens around the track, how many he sees on the TV screen, and you're like, oh, you're going over 300 kilometers per hour on the straight, but you have time to look at the screen. Okay, that's already interesting. But in terms of how he reacts to that, I think it's typical, and like I said, it's how the audience, probably most of them at least, feel. And afterwards, he was asked during the presser if he would do the same in that situation. But he was out of the emotion, he was out of the car, and he was really aware of the guys beside him as well. And he was like, I'm not going to comment to it because I know you want a funny answer, he said, but I'm not going to comment to it because it's not my problem, so I don't want to give an answer to it.
Well, I think we all remember the Brazilian Grand Prix when he'd already won the championship. So I think it's we know what the situation would actually be. And maybe that's the difference with a champion and the rest of us mere mortals, which maybe that's what McLaren have for this season. But let's focus on Max and him winning the race. Verstappen, I don't think he's back in the championship fight, but he's not going to hurt his chances if this is going to kick on. But the key thing is, compared to his last victory, Red Bull have had a transformation, a new team principal. This is Laurent Mekies' first win, Max Verstappen taking him to the promised land. How much of this was the Max Verstappen effect, the Mekies effect? Are we in for, after writing them off maybe, a brand new Red Bull?
I think what you see at Red Bull now is that there is more of a positive feeling. Like, as long as Christian was there, you felt like that the you were in a negative spiral, and you couldn't get out of it. And a new fresh start, a new fresh phase as team boss made that we could start at a new cycle, start at a positive one, start at a new trajectory. I think what it has done is that they looked at things differently, that they looked more critically to some things as well. And of course, Laurent hasn't been able to change the car around, but I think he has been able to change some processes around in terms of how they approach a weekend, because they've been very clear that all of the people we spoke to this weekend are very clear that the approach has changed this weekend in terms of how they approach this weekend. And they already did a little bit in Zandvoort, and they were quite competitive there as well on a weekend where no one really expected them to be competitive. I think that has changed, and Max was asked was in the presser. Yeah, I think it was in the presser. On that and the change Laurent made to the team and his impact. It was his first win, of course, for Laurent as a team boss in Formula One. And he was asked about it, and he said Laurent asked the right questions. And he spoke about the background of Laurent being an engineer. And yeah, I think that is the big change that you have with Christian Horner. Christian Horner was, of course, a former racer himself at a certain level, but a self-made man in Formula One, more on the business side than really on the engineering mechanical side. And I think they have now someone with Laurent as a team boss who is closer to the engineers, closer to the mechanics, but also not far off from the drivers as well, because the drivers speak very highly of him. And I think he's more in touch with what needs to happen for the team to move forward again. And I think finally, where for more than a year, we've heard from multiple sources inside the team that Red Bull just didn't know what was going on, and Christian kept saying, "Oh, we know," and the old wind tunnel and stuff like that, and we have issues with correlation. But yeah, from intern sources, we've heard already that they just didn't know what the problem was. And now for the first time in 2 years, we now finally see them getting on top of the problem. Are they there yet? No, not by a mile, because on some circuits, McLaren will still have the big advantage that they have. But they seem to turn things around. They seem to being able to find the problem with the car and yeah, make more out of it. And I think, yeah, the big point to point at the moment is this weekend in Monza, where last year they were nowhere and now they're on top in pole position and the qualification. And Ludo spoke to Pierre Wacher and Helmut Marko after the race in Monza, and both were quite adamant that they're quite positive about their chances in Baku as well in 2 weeks' time. So very interesting to see how Red Bull will move forward from this, because it looks like they really are on top of things again, and maybe are able to compete at least some circuits for the win.
Be good for the championship for that to happen. And we're talking about Ludo van den Deren, GPBlog reporter on the ground in Monza. We're, of course, recording away from the circuit, but we have our sources there to give you all the information straight from the Monza paddock. One of the moments that happened in Monza this weekend, of course, was a tale of two reactions to the podium. You alluded to it earlier. We had booing, and I don't know if that booing was for Lando Norris specifically, for the situation in McLaren, or what it was, but what did the drivers say afterwards? We don't like to see booing on any podium. This seemed a little bit unnecessary.
Yeah, although it's not the first time that we see it on Monza. And I think it was more of a reaction to the team order, I would say, as well, because it felt like it was more aimed towards Lando than with Oscar, because it felt like that with Oscar the booing was a little bit less, at least. It was more intense with Lando. So I think it was in line with that. Yeah, first of all, it never feels good if the booing is there. Although, in all sports, you know it's there. So you need to cope with it as well at some points. And we've seen Max, being booed a lot in recent years. And I think that the turnaround there is interesting because, Max has always been very stoic with that situation and the fact that people booed. And now he was cheered on. His song was sung very loudly before the Dutch national anthem was played.
We will come on to that, but let me just focus on the Norris situation for the moment, though.
Yeah, on Norris, I think he was a little bit shocked himself as well. You didn't really saw it on the podium, but in the presser afterwards, it was the last question of the presser, and he was devastated is maybe a big word, but it was close to that. He didn't really know what he had to do with it. He didn't know why they booed him, and you felt a little bit that insecurity of Lando, which we've seen in the past at multiple occasions before. And I think, where someone like Max is very good at coping with those type of situations. Some drivers are even like hyped up with those type of situations. I think it's a situation that like Lando is really not comfortable by. He has his whole career where a lot of, when he went on the podium, when he went for a win, there was a lot of cheering because people were happy that there was a different winner than Max. But the situation is different now. People know that McLaren has by far the most dominant car, but see also two drivers who are not at the that are not the best drivers in F1, and I think people are now more on the side of Max Verstappen and see more of his qualities. Where they've booed him for a very long time, but they now finally see that now he's not in a good car anymore. They see, it was not only the car, he's a proper driver. So that has changed a little bit, and I think it would be interesting to see how Lando will cope with that going forward. Although I think the Monza audience is always the most critical if you're not a Ferrari driver, and maybe the Ferrari audience was also already hoping a little bit to get Max a little bit hyped up for his move to Ferrari in 2027.
That's you here first. Let me talk about Max Verstappen then. A proper driver, apparently, of all the things I've heard him referred to as. A proper driver is a new one, but I think people knew he was always good. I think this year, almost ironically, this championship, I think 21 will always be the best one because of how vicious it was in the end. But I think this year's really highlighting how good a driver he is, even though he's not going to be the champion. And he did, like you say, receive the plaudits from the crowd singing his song, which I expect to see at the Dutch Grand Prix, but we saw it here in Italy. This is quite a turnaround. And is this just a case of appreciation for somebody winning who they're not expecting to win? Or is it, like you said, somebody who has finally got through to say, look, I am one of the best drivers of all time?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. I think one, you're right in saying that people always tend to cheer for the underdog, and in this instance, Max is the underdog compared to the dominant McLarens this season. So I think that the cheering is partly down to that, but I think it's also, I think it changed since Brazil last year. I think that was the real changing point in how people perceive Max. I think it was already brewing a little bit in 2024 where people started to see like, oh, McLaren has really now a quicker car, but he still keeps on winning. He still keeps on being able to be in front of the championship. And I think the big turnaround was Brazil, where Lando, of course, did everything wrong that he could do wrong, and Max did everything right that you could possibly do right in a chaotic race that it was. Driving with a masterclass drive. I think from that point onward, I think a lot of people that were doubtful on his qualities, maybe still with the hangover of 2021, in some people's eyes, maybe with the fact that he had a dominant car for a few years, people tend to downgrade achievements from athletes, from drivers, if that happens for a longer period of time. We've seen it with Mercedes as well. But I think it changed a little bit. We have to see, look, if Max is in a dominant car again in 3 or 4 years' time, the booing will return probably, and people will get sick of him again. That's how sport works. That's how you have those sickly that come around again. But I think for the moment there's more appreciation for Max, partly because he's now the underdog, but also partly people now more recognize how good he really is.
Really is a class of one out there. Can't speak about Italy though, and as good as Max's drive was and as interesting as McLaren's decision was, we can't speak about an Italian Grand Prix and not talk about Ferrari, especially this Italian Grand Prix, because this was Lewis Hamilton's first race in red at, well, not Italy, but at Monza, at the Italian Grand Prix. It didn't go to plan necessarily. He's coming off the summer break where he's calling himself useless. He was behind Charles again and 37 seconds behind the leaders, Charles 20, so 12 seconds behind his teammate. Ends up finishing the race in P6. Leclerc P4 battling with the podium early on. How would you view this from, well, both a Ferrari and a Lewis Hamilton perspective?
Yeah, a little bit of a underachievement for Ferrari. There was not more in it, to be honest, but they don't go away here from Monza being very happy, I would assume, after a win last season with the same regulation of cars now being beaten by not only the McLarens but also Red Bull. I think that's a big turnaround for them, and also a testament of the philosophy mistake they made over the winter, turning the whole car around. I think Leclerc did a good job on being feisty at the start of the race, really fighting Piastri with everything he got. I think it cost him a little bit in terms of the tire management, where he had to fight off Russell, but he was able to do so. And from there on, did a parade lap to the end of the race. And then on Lewis, I think, yeah, of course, his weekend was a little bit hampered by the 5-place grid drop that he still had from the weekend in Zandvoort, which made him start from P10. He had a very quick start of the race, moving up the field very quickly. But yeah, then after that, he was stuck behind Russell and couldn't do much more from that. I think overall, the interesting thing for me to see is where Lewis, before the summer break, was quite down in a lot of weekends, and especially with the highlight being Hungary, of course. I think it seems like he tries to be a little bit more positive, where I don't feel that's really necessary at this point, because Ferrari at P4 and P6 in Monza is not a result you're going to be happy about normally. And also for Lewis, being beaten by your teammate again, like in Zandvoort, in the qualification and the race, it feels a little bit strange for me to then hear him being very happy after the race, very positive, and on that things clicked again, and that the car is more feeling towards his liking. And I'm like, you're still outdriven by your teammate. It doesn't feel like Lewis to me, but maybe that's a way for him to get his spirit up again for next season as well, to not go so down into that season that he has a burnout after 2 races.
Yeah, the copium for Ferrari fans extends to the Ferrari fan Lewis Hamilton, it seems. It's not been a great season for him, but yeah, chin up after the summer break, so it is a little interesting. I really want to see how 2026 shakes things up, because if Ferrari are where they are right now, I just don't know how he'll feel about it all. So I don't want to wish the season away, but there is a lot to look forward to. Those regulations are going to be hugely changeable. Let's focus on the present, because next up we've got the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. We've had this Paddock update reversion a little bit, speaking a bit longer, and hopefully everybody at home, you've enjoyed this. If you have, please like, comment and subscribe. Tell a friend. Trying to grow the channel as we go through the season. So thank you, Tim, for bringing us everything so far from the Italian Grand Prix. Look forward to speaking to you for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix in a fortnight. And thank you everybody else for watching.